Learning Lab. My name is Sahar, and I'm a PCC graduate and also on staff here at New Ventures West, so I help with graduate programs and business development, so bringing this work out into organizations. And I'm thrilled to introduce Laura Malone, who's a dear friend and also a PCC graduate. She's going to be leading a session on Bodynamics, which is this incredible body of work and quite rich and robust. And so we're excited to be able to offer this to you and look forward to the next several hours together. So Laura, in her extensive training, she has not only trained obviously at New Ventures West and in Bodynamics, but she has also had 10 years of experience in Radix, which is Reichian, yeah? Yeah, Reichian work. At the Strozzi Institute, she is a coach and member of Alethea, and has done work in Hakomi as well as this Bodynamics. So I'm sure there's a lot that she's left off this list that she's been trained in. So
I'm old.
So again, welcome, and thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Sahar. Welcome. And welcome those of you who are on the streaming video as well. So I've been thinking about this moment for about a week, and what I'm noticing is how much more alive it is than it was in my imagination. So, yeah. Just take a moment yourselves to feel how it is for you to be here. You know, there could be mixed feelings. This is an intense space, right? I mean, we've all been through an ordeal here together. And we made it, or we wouldn't be here. So go ahead and look around the room and just notice as you do that. Do any memories come up for you? How does it feel to be in this space? And notice the people too. So some of you know each other. There might be some who don't know anyone here. And of course those who are on video may be by yourselves, but I'm with you. Yeah. Notice what sensations come up for you and what feelings as you recognize who's here. I recognize a few faces, and I'm really happy about that because I looked at the list and it was like, I don't know any of these people. And then you walked in and I recognized some of you, so thank you for coming. So how many of you have some idea of what Bodynamics is? You've heard of it before? 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. How many of you use somatics heavily in your practice already? Good. How many of you are here to learn about how you can bring Bodynamics into your coaching practice? I figured there'd be a lot of hands. How many of you are here to learn something about yourself personally? Beautiful. I'm really glad to see that. You know, when we first started at New Ventures West, the first module was on personal work, and that's true Bodynamics as well. If you don't have the body of a person who does Bodynamics, you can't really do it with people. So, yeah. I'm curious if anyone's here to learn something about parenting. Parenting. Yeah, so Bodynamics is a developmental model based on the development of babies and children. So how do our experiences when we were babies and children show up now that we're adults? But you can learn a lot if you're a parent about what you're doing right, what you could do differently, and please don't beat yourself up if you hear something that, oh no, I shouldn't be doing that. It's a common thing that happens to people when they go into the Bodynamics training. This is a learning lab, and so you're here to learn, but just to let you know, I'm here to learn too. This is the first time I've ever presented this material. So I'm relying heavily on domain 4. And yeah, so just bear with me. And questions are welcome. And if I can't answer your question, I will get an answer for you. So Bodynamics, as Sahar said, is a very, very rich and complex system of understanding people. I've been through 21 full-time days of training, which is a little over a year, similar to New Ventures West. If I wanted to become a focus on Bodynamics exclusively, it's a 4-year training program because it maps every individual muscle to a particular psychological function. So what that means is that as you're doing exercises today, hi Dan, not everything is going to resonate for you because you may already be resourced there, or you may need something different from what I'm offering. So don't expect to have an experience that's meaningful to you the whole time, but hopefully some of the things that we do will resonate for you. Also, don't try to get it all. Bodynamics isn't through here, it's through here. So if you struggle to try to grasp everything that I'm saying, you're going to lose contact with yourself. And the most important thing today is to be in yourself with your experience and listen lightly. Now, I've given you handouts that are really full of information. We're not going to get through all of that. I'm one of these people that tries to, I feel like I have to include everything. It was the criticism I got when I was in my developmental conversation with James. He said, "We noticed you included a lot." So that has to do with a particular Bodynamics character structure. And so yeah, we're not going to get through it all. We're going to get as far as we can. And the good news is that I'm planning some follow-on workshops. So if your appetite gets whetted and you want to experience more, there will be plenty of opportunities, both for experiential work and for training. So this isn't a training, just to be clear. This is a taste. And what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you an overview of the theory and practice. This is not in your handouts. Oh, actually, there is an agenda. I think it's on page 2. But it's the long story. It's the workshop. It's not what we're going to do today. We'll cover some of this. I'll be giving you some experiential practices so that you can feel into what Bodynamics feels like. I'm going to try to pepper in some examples and cases of people I've worked with. And if you have questions about, can you give me an example, I'll do my best. It's going to be very interactive, so with each other, as well as with the entire group. So for those of you on the live stream, I realize that you're not going to be able, there are going to be quite a few paired exercises, and unless you brought somebody with you, you won't be able to do the paired exercises, but you can use your imagination, and maybe if there's a body part involved, you can touch yourself there, just so you can get a sense of what it is that I'm talking about. And there's enough in the handouts that I think you're still going to get something out of this experience. So let's see what I haven't said. So Bodynamics is a way of understanding your narrative through the body. So our narrative isn't just a belief system, it isn't just our behavior, it's supported by the way we show up in our bodies. So Bodynamics is a way of working with the current narrative to step into a new narrative where there are resources by activating the muscles that contain the resources. So one way to think about this in terms of what you're going to get is it's a systematic way of understanding narratives in the body. It might help you even in creating narratives. I know I struggle. I've always struggled with creating narratives. And so it will give you some ideas. And you might get some ways to resource both yourself and your clients through this experience. So I'm going to talk about what resources are, what disruptions in resources are and how they occur, and the different ways they can show up. 7 stages of childhood development. So we develop new resources as we develop voluntary control of our muscles. When we're babies, we can't even lift our heads. We're just reflexes. Everything is a reflex. Eventually, the first thing we learn to do is lift our heads. That's the first muscle that comes online is called the longus capitis. So I'm going to talk about the stages of development and what they have to do with the possibilities that show up as those muscles come online. I'm also going to take us through some exercises to give you a tangible sense of the importance of attunement. So attunement is a key concept both for coaching, as you know, and also for Bodynamics. So the relationship is really important in Bodynamics. It's not just about doing exercises. It's about being with your coach and experiencing them holding the space for you to have this new capacity. And I'm also going to talk about some ways that you can learn more about Bodynamics. So be open and curious. Invite your inner child. Take your opinion hat off, because some of this may seem a little far-fetched. I know it did to me when I first heard about it. You really have to experience it, I think, to understand how it works. Yeah, let me talk about minding the container. So I probably don't need to say this to a group of New Ventures West coaches, but we need to hold space for each other with love and care. People can get triggered sometimes. It's emotional material. We're working in the emotional stream as well as the somatic and relational stream. So they really aren't separate streams. Somatics is a foundation for the relational and emotional stream to live in. So in terms of minding the container, one of the things you can do is to speak out loud your experience to the group, because what that does is it helps the other people who are maybe more reluctant to come forward to recognize or resonate with what you're saying. Now, if you do get triggered, I'm going to show you some things that you can do to take care of yourself, because this is a workshop. It's not one-on-one work. So I want you to be able to be open to your emotional experience, but there are some things you can do if you get flooded. The first thing that you can do is you can leave the room. That's okay. And by the way, if you need to use the bathroom, feel free to just get up and leave. We will have a break, but I don't know if it's going to be in time with your rhythm, so just go ahead. Let's see. Yeah, so you can also lie down. And we're going to be doing some work which it would be really awesome if people would be willing to get on the floor. Now, I realize some of you may not be comfortable with that, but the more closer we are to the ground, the more we can get into a child state, which is where these experiences get activated. There's an idea in Bodynamics called dosing. And so what dosing means is that if I give you an exercise to do, for instance, let's say I have you do this. For some of us, a very subtle experience is required for you to be able to feel what this is about. It's not all about, right? For some of us, that's what we need. We need to release. For others of us, we're operating on a much more gentle, soft plane. And the thing about these exercises is that if you don't have awareness when you're doing the exercise, it's not going to have any impact on you. It's like, why do some people taking a yoga class change and some people just get a good workout? It's the quality of awareness that you bring to what you're doing. So really be sensitive to yourself and what you need. And if you start to get spacey or disconnected from yourself or even tired, that's a signal that that's enough. And so just stop. But I'm going to show you right now something that you can also do if you want to stay in the room and you feel overwhelmed. So this will be your first Bodynamics exercise. And this is something you can do with your clients when they get flooded also. Can everybody see me? I'm sort of, let me move out here because I'm sort of, can I move forward, Sahar? Let's see. Wow, this is intense. So everybody try this with me. Hopefully the mic won't get messed up while I'm doing this. Feet flat on the floor. And fold yourself over. Put your opposite hands on the outsides of your opposite knees. And press out. And hold it. Keep holding it. It should be activating the muscles along the sides of your thighs. Make sure you're breathing, and then very slowly to the count of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I should have said let it go. I didn't say that, so you probably have no idea why I was counting. So try it now if you haven't done it already. Just very slowly letting go. So, does anyone have anything to share about what you're noticing, if anything's shifted for you, having done that?
Letting go, I could feel like a shift in light, like almost like a shade going down. I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And did your awareness descend down
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah. And then just kind of a release in the core area.
Beautiful. Nice. I feel more present. More like I have more of a container here, so I can be here a little more. So that's a containment exercise. Containment is one of the concepts in Bodynamics. It's what they call an ego function, but you can call it a presence skill, which is to be able to contain whatever's coming up in you without getting overstimulated. Important skill for coaches, right? If you're getting triggered by what your client is talking about, you need to be able to contain what's coming up in you so that you can stay present for your client. All right. So we are going to do a warm-up. Any questions before we dive in? Okay. Welcome. So let's stand up. And if you're willing to kick your shoes off, that would be great, because we're going to start with a grounding exercise, and if you can't feel the ground, then it's kind of hard to be as grounded. So again, just to remind you to sense in as we're doing these. It's not a workout, it's not a physical exercise, it's an awareness exercise for working with your energy. So let's just start. Actually, just start by what it feels like to be standing. Just notice your quality of contact with the ground. Where's your energy concentrated? For most of us, it's in our heads. See if you can bring your energy down into your heart, your belly, and legs. So this can start to give us an experience of being in our body rather than our body being something down there. Just check in. How do you like having a body? Not everybody likes having a body. I like having a body, but I'm weird. Maybe there's some things you like about having a body and some things you don't like about having a body, like getting pain in my knee as I get older. Don't like that. But I like the sense of empowerment and connection that having a body gives me. All right, so let's just start with a little grounding exercise. So just move your weight back and forth from the left to the right and feel the sides of your feet making contact with the ground. Really feel the rolling, all the muscles that are involved in the rolling. And by the way, if I go too fast or too slow, this means too fast, that means too slow, okay? Then roll from the balls of your feet to your heels. Does one of these feel more familiar in terms of how you walk around in the world? Then I want to invite you to squeeze your toes as if you're trying to pick up a piece of Kleenex or cloth with your toes. And then lift your toes up off the floor. Spread them wide. And then when you put them back down, see if you can really spread them apart. So as we're growing up, we gain more and more control over the muscles of our toes, and we get a more and more solid and refined base. Now take a minute just to imagine, sense the middle of your feet, the top of your arch. It might help to close your eyes for this one. Just imagine sending roots through the ground, deep into the earth. And you can play with doing this on the inhale or doing it on the exhale. See which feels right. Anybody want to share what you're experiencing? You can go ahead and open your eyes. Just notice if the room seems any different now. Yes.
The spreading the toes is really wonderful for some reason.
Uh-huh. What are you noticing about it? What's wonderful?
This makes me happy. It's kind of, I don't know, it has a certain pleasure to it.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, for me, being connected to the ground is very pleasurable. It's very reassuring.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I notice the room seems more still.
Uh-huh. Yeah. When we're busy in our heads, everything outside of us can seem busy as well. And when we slow down and get connected to the ground, things can slow down. Okay. So now we're going to do a centering move. So centering has to do with knowing what's going on with you. And all of our centering muscles are in the center of our bodies. So, anybody, do you all know how to do the cross crawl? I will teach it, but I'm just curious. Is that something familiar to you? Okay, cool. So this is one for dosing for sure. With the cross crawl, we'll start big, and then I'm going to invite you to go smaller and smaller with it. See what feels the best for you. So what you do is you bring your opposite arm and opposite knee together, like this, and you just walk. And just notice which muscles are getting activated as you do this. And then try doing it a little less. And a little less. See if you can stay in contact with the same muscles you were using to do it big, doing it less. And then just slowly let it move into just remembering, just doing it without doing it. Imagine yourself doing it. So how was that? More stable, uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that too. Okay. So now let's do an exercise for boundaries, and then I'll jump into the material after that. So we did one just a moment ago, the containment exercise, but we can also do that standing up. So what you want to do, your feet are shoulder width apart, and press your knees out sideways to activate these muscles.
So you're on the outside of your feet?
No, your feet are flat. Can everybody see me? Your feet are flat, and you're pressing out, as if you're trying to move your knees that way. And just hold that, and do it 3 times. Hold it, relax it. And please just feel free to share if you notice something. Yeah. Right. They're kind of asleep. Yeah?
And I thought my legs were strong.
Uh-huh.
But,
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean they're not. But
Right. Some of your muscles are strong, and others are asleep, less conscious. And that's one of the main principles in Bodynamics that I'm going to be getting into, is that we have areas of resource in our muscles, and we have areas of unconsciousness, blind spots in the body. Now, bring your knees closer together. This one's really good for me for some reason. So squeeze them together. Relax. Do it 3 times. Squeeze them together. And relax. Squeeze them together. Really tight. And relax. So what I notice is I feel much more connected to my core after doing that. You're nodding? Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
Tightening, coming together.
Coming together.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so coming together is an actual psychological experience that happens in the muscles. Falling apart is too. Yeah. Okay, so have a seat. So fortunately, my next slide was introducing myself, and I don't have to do that. But what I will do is talk to you about what interested me in Bodynamics. So I grew up in an academic family, and all the relating was from here up. And I had all these feelings, and I didn't know what to do with them. So after college, I got trained as a radix neo-Reichian educator. We called it's the same thing as a coach educator. We were all looking for words that didn't say therapy, right? And it was really powerful work. How many of you know what Reichian work is? Anybody? A few, okay. So Wilhelm Reich he can be considered the father of somatics. He was a peer of Sigmund Freud's, and what he realized was that when people stopped talking, things started to happen, when they started to just experience their bodies. And he came up with a theory called muscular armor. And the theory of muscular armor is that energy flows in our bodies, and it gets blocked in different parts of our bodies. So you know when you get a lump in your throat, for instance? That's a armoring in your throat. Or when you, another example is when your heart feels closed, that's armoring in your chest area. So the work was really good for me. It helped me get into my body, but it's very intense, and it's all about emotional release. And emotional release is only half of the story. So what can happen with Reichian work is it's kind of like you get super charged up. Maybe you've done breath work of some kind. You get super charged up, and then it's like putting your finger on the end of a hose and turning it on full blast. It starts to kink. So you find out where all the kinks are, and then boom, you explode. It's delicious to release like that. At least it was for me, but you can't really live like that. And so part of what happened was that those of us who were doing it were walking around all opened up with no idea how to be open in the world, raw, falling apart. And so Reichian work is really good for releasing tension, but tension is a kind of a resource. It's a way that we hold ourselves together in order to cope. And when you take away the resource and there's nothing to replace it, you're in trouble. So, so I moved on from that, and I trained here at New Ventures West, and I did the Strozzi Somatic coaching training, which is really helpful, especially for executive coaching. Do we have any Strozzi grads here? No. You're attending it, okay. Yeah, so Strozzi is really good for how to show up under pressure and maintain your center and flow with what's happening around you, and not instead of collapsing or fighting. But it's not, I was more interested in working with issues around intimacy and relationship, not so much leadership. And also, they didn't have a advanced bodywork program when I was there, so I scouted around and remembered Bodynamics. And Bodynamics is a way to work very precisely to not just take away tension, but to add energy in the muscles, add resources so that you don't need to use the tension. You have something else to use. Okay, so what is Bodynamics? It's a method and a theory. So as a theory, it's a way to understand your client's current narratives or your own current narratives as they exist in the body. And as a method, it's a way to work with those narratives and help you step into a new narrative through your body. Like I said, your body can be the support. It's also, we are our bodies, right? We're not just our bodies, but if our bodies, we experience ourselves through our bodies, through sensation, through emotion. There's a conversation going on between our beliefs and our bodies. And so Bodynamics lets you work directly with the body to get to the heart of the matter of whatever's going on with your current narrative. So I'm trying to plug in some concepts that you already know into Bodynamics theory, hoping that that will be helpful. So the reason I think Bodynamics is good for integral coaches is it's developmental. It's present-centered. So unlike many therapies, the goal is not to go back into the past and understand what happened to you and why it happened. It's not asking why questions. It's more asking how questions, working with how. So how does an issue show up in your life right now? And how can you be differently with this issue? Sound familiar? It's what we do as integral coaches. This is just how we do it through the body. It doesn't mean that stuff from the past doesn't come up, because it does. Every time there's a new resource being activated, let's say pushing away, if you can't push away, you're going to have feelings about it because you were told you don't get to do that. Or I don't like you when you do that. So there is emotional release that comes up because it's always scary to step across a boundary when we learned very early that that's a boundary we're not supposed to cross. But the goal is to be different now rather than to understand why we are the way we are and try to heal ourselves that way. It's a skills-based framework. So like you design coaching outcomes. There's skills that you want your clients to be able to build. Well, these are skills through the body that will enable a new narrative. And it's also a way to develop the body of a coach. Yeah? So there's a reason there's the word body in the body of a coach. It doesn't mean a disembodied body of a coach. Just a little bit about the background. It was developed by 12 Danish therapists, so it comes out of Denmark. They did 40 years of research, and in fact they're still doing research, so it's probably more than 40 years now, studying the psychomotor development of infants. So the basic principle is that I think I already said this, but as we are growing up, as new muscles come into voluntary use, new possibilities open up for how to be in the world. So they studied the development of voluntary muscles. They also worked with adults to palpate certain muscles, thousands of adults, and see what material came up for them as they palpated those muscles, and they started to see patterns and record those patterns. And then they tested those patterns. They developed a theory and then tested those patterns on adults that they were working with and found that it fit. So it's an evidence-based approach. This is an encyclopedia of all the muscles and what their psychological function is, as well as what the developmental movements are related to them. It's called the Body Encyclopedia, and you're welcome to come out and look at it on the break if you want to. So take a minute to think about how richly we use the body in our language. He's a pain in the neck. They've got to keep a stiff upper lip. She holds it close to her heart. You need to learn to take a stand. My heart is full. I feel it in my bones. These words are everywhere, right? At one point, when language was developed, we felt the relationship between these words and our bodies. But as Westerners, we've mostly forgotten. So it just becomes a metaphor that doesn't really mean anything. But the point is, it does. How many of you took Somatic Day with Steve March? So you remember shapes? So there was the puffed up shape, the driving shape, the collapsed shape, the whatever shape. Those are all shapes that can be precisely described in Bodynamics terms. In fact, there's more than one whatever shape. There's more than one driven shape. So Bodynamics is a really precise way to work with shape. That's really what it is, in a nutshell. So the work is about helping clients develop resources. If you turn to page 5 in your handout, and thank you for not spending the whole time looking at the handout. I imagine it's really tempting, but I think you're going to get more staying here than reading the handout. So let's look at some of these. My opinion counts. Look at this little kid. This is a resource little kid. His opinion counts. He can come out with his power. I know what I need and I can ask for help. I'm comfortable being myself in a group. I'm in touch with my own experience. I'm in touch with outer reality. I can support myself. I can reach out. So to me, these sound like new narratives. These are the kinds of things that we're trying to invite our clients to step into. And resources are not just held in the mind, they're held in the muscles and the fascia. So you know what fascia is? Fascia is the saran wrap that holds your muscles together. So resources are developed spontaneously. You know, nobody needs to say to a little child, now it's time for you to learn to crawl. The child just is driven to learn how to crawl because there's that toy and they want that toy and there's got to be a way to get it. And so they learn first to lift their heads, then they learn to sit up. No, they learn to roll over, then they learn to sit up, then they learn to crawl, scoot, bring themselves up the wall, stand, walk, right? It's a progression. And what happens is, if that's all going well and they're feeling supported and okay about doing all of that, the muscles become energized and responsive. It's called imprinting in Bodynamics terms. So the muscle gets an imprint. This is okay. It's okay to feel this. It's okay to be curious. It's okay to need. It's okay to have an opinion. It's okay to shine in a group. These are all issues that people have that they're afraid it's not okay if there's been a disruption. And another important concept in Bodynamics is that mutual connection is the context. So like I said, if it's okay, then the resource develops. But if there's something happening with the parent, the caregiver, that it's not okay, then that also imprints on the muscles. And the connection is broken. So mutual connection is the question, if I'm all of who I am and you're all of who you are, can we be connected? So what can happen is, if it's not okay, then the child is forced to either to break connection with themselves or to break connection with the caregivers. They have to make a choice, because this doesn't feel good to be rejected or not allowed to have this experience. You look like you have a question.
Me?
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking about what you were saying. So, so that you said there is a choice there, that the child makes a choice, like, oh, either I have to make this.
Well, they make a decision. I wouldn't really call it a choice.
Okay, so it's unconscious
Right.
decision.
Yes.
What makes that?
Why would they choose one versus the other?
Yeah.
I'll talk about that very soon.
Okay.
Yeah. So before we get into that, which we're going to get into in just a second, if you turn to page 6 in your handout, 6 and 7, these are some examples of the functions of different muscles. And some of them will make sense and some of them will seem a little bit far-fetched until you experience them. But I'll just point out some of the more obvious ones. Neck muscles are for orienting. So when you orient to your environment, you have to use your neck muscles. If for some reason it's not okay to orient, or maybe it's scary out there, your neck muscles might be tense or not have any energy in them. It's also about keeping your head. So when I'm working really hard to not express a big emotion because I need to be communicating something, I get really tight in my scalenes. I had a massage yesterday as I was preparing for this presentation, and boy was I tight. So fortunately, I'm more relaxed now, so I can have all of me here. Shoulder elevators are for carrying burdens, right? So at a certain age, we start to be able to pick up a bucket, say, and carry it to the other side of the room. These muscles get imprinted around being able to carry things. And psychologically, we have the expression, she carries the world on her shoulders, right? You can see that in people's bodies. You can feel it in your own body when you feel a sense of burden. Elbow extensors for pushing away, setting boundaries. We did a little bit of work with grounding. The toes and the feet have to do with contact with the ground and feeling the support there. You know when apes go like this? Oh. The pecs have to do with self-esteem and power. This is my space, right? And then the respiratory muscles, which a lot of them, they're all around the lungs, obviously, they would have to do with just fullness of being able to exist. Yeah, so we're not going to get to your question yet. We're going to do an exercise first. You can contain. Okay. So what I wanted to do now was an exercise with attunement. So I've been emphasizing how important relationship is, not just the muscles, but relationship. And so this is an exercise for you to have an experience around attunement. So what I'd like you to do is get out the object that you brought. If you didn't bring one, then I've got a slew of objects over there, and just choose something that really interests you or attracts you. There's no shame in going up and getting an object. And those of you who are on the live stream, if you're by yourself, you can still do this exercise internally with your object to some extent. You can try there'll be some movement involved, and you can try that as well. Oh, somebody grabbed Babar. My husband was very reluctant to have me bring Babar in today. He said, "What if somebody takes it?" I said, They're not going to do that. This is how important the bar is to him. His whole childhood is wrapped up in that little elephant. He says bay bar. I'm not really sure. Okay, find a partner. Does everybody have a partner? Are we even or odd? Maybe you'll need to step out so that everybody else can have a partner. There's 3 people there, so. Sorry, Michelle.
You can't do a triad.
No. You need to stay on the video, right, Sahar? Yeah. Yeah, you can move wherever you want. Yeah, Phil, in fact, if you want to sit on the floor, that would be the best. Anybody who's willing to sit on the floor, that would be ideal. So, one of you is going to be the giver and one of you is going to be the receiver, but just focus on me for now because I'm going to give you some instructions. And so what's going to happen, just an overview, is that the giver is going to share why the object is so important to you with your partner. And if you just found something on the shelf, then why it interested you or why it attracted you. And the receiver, you're going to be reflecting back at some point what you heard. So it's attunement, right? So let's start just by first decide who's going to be the giver first. We'll switch, so you'll both get a chance. Decide who's going to be which. And if you're the giver, what I want you to do is just examine the object for yourself. You're not really focused on the other person right now. You're just really sensing into how important it is to you or what interests you about it. And see if you can sense your belly while you're doing that. And then what's going to happen is you're going to tell your partner why it's important to you. And then after you do that, you pause, and then the listener is going to reflect back what they heard. And then the giver is going to tell the listener what it was like to be attuned to. And by the way, you may not feel attuned to. So this is not, the goal is not to feel attuned to. The goal is to get a sense of what attunement or the lack of it feels like for you. Okay? So go ahead. To what you're feeling emotionally and somatically. What sensations are you having in your body as you're doing this? And is everybody ready to now give back? Is this okay to do that now? All right, so we'll enter that step. So go ahead and give it back. Notice how that feels. And share. Let's come back. Start to let that go and come back into the group, and you can stay on the floor if you want to. So how was that?
So interesting.
Yeah? What was interesting?
For me, something that's very familiar to me came up, which my partner was obviously, with evidence, was listening to me. But it's a stronger sense of being disappointed came up, and it's something I know from in my life. So it was really, I was actually having a visceral reaction,
Yeah.
disappointment.
Around the giving or the receiving?
When I was talking about my object, then I heard how I was observed and attuned to that piece.
So not feeling heard and attuned to and feeling disappointed in how?
Yeah, I felt there were some old feelings coming up about disappointment.
Right. It's very disappointing when what's important to us isn't gotten.
Yes.
It's a disruption.
Okay.
And if that happens repeatedly throughout our lives, we start to give up sharing what's important to us. So, because it feels dangerous. If I share what's important, I'm just going to feel disappointed. And so I'm just going to keep it to myself. Yeah. Anyone else?
I had, I guess the most somatic and emotional reaction actually receiving the object. It felt familiar to receive an emotional object, and I didn't want another one. I didn't want it. And so I shared that when I gave it back, I was like, relief.
Did it feel like a burden? Yeah.
It felt like I didn't want to hold something that important.
And is that your experience in the world? Sometimes?
I cannot take on more important people's things.
Yeah.
Other
Yeah. I
people's
mean,
things.
you know, that's probably a common experience for people who work in the helping professions, or whatever you want to call them, is there's both a desire to help people, but there's also, you're an antenna for other people's needs. And it can start to feel like too much. And that has to do with an ego structure, which we may or may not get to today. I hope we can talk about it a little bit. But just to say briefly, at around age 2, 3, a child becomes very altruistic. You know, they're going around, I give you, and boundaries around what's enough can get confused. Yeah. Anyone else?
I think one of the things came up which I didn't share because I wasn't aware. I'm becoming aware of now that and the concern that came up in me sharing is that if I were to give voice to my sensations, and it would be, did just being me somehow was a cause of discomfort for you?
Right. Right.
So I wonder which age is that?
Right. Well, it's probably all the ages. I mean, that's really the question. That's really the question is, can I be all of me, and can we stay in relationship, or am I going to make you uncomfortable, so you're going to pull away from me, or you're going to stop me somehow and break the connection? This particular exercise has to do with a phase called the autonomy phase, which is around like when the child starts to crawl. So, it depends on when the child starts to crawl until they're fully mobile. So it's the age when the child is going around and finding what they're excited about and sharing it with the caregivers or anybody who'll listen. And people have all different kinds of reactions. There's an exercise that I decided not to do today called the parent-child exercise, where you play with different reactions. I decided not to do it because it's so intense and we just don't have time to deal with all the feelings that might come up doing this exercise. But the parent may say, what the child wants is for you to get really excited with them about this thing. And what a misattunement can look like is, oh, that's very nice. Or, oh, sweetie, you're so beautiful. The kid it's not about me, it's about this thing, right? So that even though it's a very loving response, it's not the response the child needs. Or, trying to think of another example. Well, you get the picture. You know, if at each stage we need a different kind of attunement. And if our caregivers are stuck in one particular area, then they're not going to recognize what kind of attunement we need. And they're not going to be able to give it to us. So they're not purposely depriving us. And you as parents, you're not purposely depriving your kids of an attunement. If they need it, you have a blind spot. That's why we keep on doing this work. Because nobody had perfect parents. Nobody I know.
Is it because we didn't get it ourselves?
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you have the resource, then you can attune because you can sense it in the other. And so that's why it's important for coaches to have the body of a coach. Similar to the idea that you can't take somebody deeper than you can go. You can't help somebody develop a resource that you don't have. Was one easier than the other, the giving or receiving? Did anybody find that one was easier?
I found one more joyful than the other. So it was very surprising for me. And talking about my own object, right? Giving it away and seeing the appreciation was more satisfying and more joyful. And when I got it back, I was totally surprised that I didn't really care about that by getting it back. Because I saw the joy in the other person, which is a bit of a typical thing. Yeah, but it was a very, very big surprise to sense into that.
Yeah. Yeah, some of us are more resourced in giving and some of us are more resourced in receiving. Yes?
I found it hard and finding it hard to share if I didn't feel attuned, because I want everything to be,
Right.
you want everything to be, I don't know, happy or something. I don't like that I'm saying that even. But, and I realized like there's certain things that are jarring and I have a strong reaction and a part of me says, oh, you shouldn't be so fastidious just because the person said that and you meant that. But that also, I think that is really deeply important.
Yeah,
in terms
it is, absolutely. So you give up your self-expression to take care of the other person. And most of us do that. Yeah. And so one of the things we're going to be talking about in a little while is having the experience of saying your no, that's not it, and having it be received lovingly. That it's okay to say, no, that's not what I want. Most of us don't have that experience. Yeah.
One thing in our pair that we both got objects from the back of the table, and we were both surprised by how quickly we became attached to them.
Yeah. So that's the interesting thing about this age is, and that's why I'm really happy that most of you got on the floor, because at this age, there's no difference between me and this piece of candy. We're one, me and this piece of candy. So I think that probably is what got triggered in you. And so when I let go of it, I'm letting go of a piece of myself. So there can be this sense of loss of self with giving.
That's exactly what I expressed was
And that very, very first reaction when I was entombed, it was a little jolt and
Yeah.
giving away.
Yeah. 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 I remember when I was a kid, I collected rocks. And my sister's a preschool teacher. And she took my rock collection without asking and started sharing it with her students because she figured, well, it's going to be meaningful to them because they're little kids. And when I saw that she had it, I was furious. It's like, because each of those rocks for me had its own little spirit, you know, its own little personality. It wasn't just a rock. And she didn't she should have understood that because she was a childhood educator. She was also my little sister. And she was going to take what I wasn't going to share. So, okay.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah,
Is
absolutely.
this around age 3? Is this what's happening like this?
2, 3,
Yeah.
or earlier, 18 months. Yeah,
Okay.
1.5. Sahar, you said there was a question on the web stream.
Simona, who's on the live stream, is asking if you could speak to gender socialization and its role in being resourced in disruptions in our development.
That's a really big question, and I can speak to it a little bit. I'd rather delay my response to that because we're going to be talking about developmental stages, and it's definitely pertinent to very, very early development. But I don't feel that Bodynamics, at least what I've been taught, has integrated that question. They're working on trying to integrate that question. And I'm certainly not an expert. There might be somebody in the room who can speak to it after you hear more material. That could be interesting. So I will answer it to some extent later, and then Simona, is that what you said? Can let you know if she has a follow-on question that maybe I can get to in our Q&A section at the end. Okay. All right. So, do we need a break now, or can you wait another 20 minutes? If you need to take a break now, go ahead. I'm going to keep going with the material. And if a whole bunch of you get up, I'm going to stop. I see 3 people getting up, so maybe it's time for a break. Let's take a break.
What I found really fascinating about this is that...
Oh, you took the paintbrush.
Yeah.
Okay, we all ready to start back in? So you can also do the cross crawl in your chair. And since most of our work is done with clients seated, it's good to learn how to do some of these centering exercises while you're sitting, so that you can maybe quietly do them if you need to while you're working with someone. So let's do the cross crawl, and you can either start big or start small. And so big would be like this. So your weight should be on your sit bones so you're not slumped back, so you have support like this. Small would be just unweighting your heel and just starting to go in that direction. And maybe you can even sense it without moving. So back to this idea of dosing. What feels right to you? What helps you to feel your core? For me, it's a subtle movement. Helps me feel my core more because it's less of a doing. And then feel your sit bones on the chair. And let's do one more thing, actually a couple more things. This movement also is a centering movement, but it integrates the top and bottom half of the body. So some of us live from here up, and some of us live more from here down. We want all of us. There are muscles in the small of the back called the Quadratus Lumborum, and you can activate them by lifting up one sit bone at a time. You need those muscles to do it. Now, for some of you, go ahead and stop. Just notice, for some of you, something may have shifted by doing that. For others of you, nothing has changed, and the possible reason for that is because you don't need activation, you need stretching. So that's the next idea I'm going to get into here. So try stretching it, and I'll show you how, and see if that makes a difference for you. If you just kind of fold yourself over this way, you're stretching your low back, and then fold yourself over this way and with a little bit of a twist. Do that a few times. So you want to feel a stretching in the long muscles in the mid-back. Now see, that one makes more of a difference for me. Now I can really feel my feet. Anybody else? Yeah? Yeah. So this is about positions. So if you turn to page 9 in your handout, and this is going to start to address the question that you brought in. So when a child is not attuned to, well, when they are attuned to, they're in what Bodynamics calls the healthy position. So in the healthy position, we feel confident, we feel resourced, we feel available, we're flexible in response to what's going on in the outside world. The one thing that can happen is that we assume that everybody else has the resources that we have. We don't see or expect that other people can't do what we can do. And so we don't teach it if we need to teach it. We don't resonate with it if they need resonance. This happens a lot with coaches who are working at a deeper level, and it's like, why aren't you getting this? I get it. Why aren't you getting it? And so it's important to remember that if you're resourced in a particular area, that doesn't mean that other people are. So there are two ways that people are disrupted in their resources, are not developed. One is more of a giving up response of the need or the ability, the impulse, and the other is more of a holding tight and fighting for the ability or the impulse. So when we're disrupted very early, that's called the early position, or if it's a very severe disruption. So let's take, for example, a baby learning to crawl. And mommy was very happy, or daddy, or whoever the caregiver is. They were happy when baby was close. But when baby moves away, they get scared for whatever reason. They're afraid baby's going to hurt their self, or they're afraid that they're not going to be loved anymore, and so they put a kibosh on this exploration business. No, we're going to stay merged because that was all cozy. I don't want you to do that. I'm afraid you don't love me if you do that. If it's severe and early, the baby will not be able to form the impulse. So the impulse to crawl won't really fully develop. In fact, they may skip crawling altogether. And what happens in the muscle is that it becomes resigned. It loses energy. So a person who feels no impulse to explore and always lets other people take the lead, it's like, I'll do whatever you want. I don't really care. Probably has some sort of resignation, some giving up of feeling their own impulses. And so this is where blind spots live in our clients. It's not that they're not getting something cognitively, it's that they've never felt it. They weren't allowed to feel it, so they couldn't move with it and embody it. Now, if the disruption happens a little later, and this is called the late position, so the impulse is built, but then it gets stopped for some reason, or let's say the caregiver is tired of being a caregiver. It's like, oh, you can crawl? Good. Crawl. Walk. Get away from me. You know, I've had enough. I need space for myself. So the impulse can form, but the coming back doesn't get to happen. The refueling doesn't get to happen, so the connection is lost. So in the one case, there's a giving up of the self in the early phase. It's like, I'm not going to feel this because I'm going to lose connection. I'm not going to have this impulse because I'm going to lose connection. If it happens later or less severely, then it's, I'm going to give up the connection because this is really important to me to feel this about myself. Or I'm going to fight to have this need expressed because, and I know you're not going to like it, but I need to have this. Does that start to answer your question?
Yes, it has to do with the fact of dependency and helplessness of the child in its development, that they first decide to keep the connection and let go of the self, or later on they keep the self and disconnect.
Right. And so what happens is, in the former case, the muscle loses energy. So all of us have parts of our bodies that we just can't feel. I remember when I first learned the body scan, there were parts of me, I could feel where my tension was. We can all feel where our tension was. That's pretty obvious where our tension is. And so our tension cries for help. It's like, something's wrong here. Help me get rid of this. But I couldn't feel my calves. It was like there was this emptiness between my knees and my feet. It's like, I know they're there, but there's no aliveness there. There's no sense of me existing in my calves. When I finally started to ground and feel my calves, it was such a huge relief. It was like, oh, God, now I've got someplace to stand, you know? So The early position is a position with low energy. If you generally feel low energy, chances are you have a lot of giving up in your muscles. Whereas the late position is higher energy. It's more like, I've got the energy built up, but I can't let it go.
Is that where you get tight?
Yeah,
Yeah, tight muscles.
yeah, you get tight muscles. And so the energy doesn't flow. So there can also be a sense of not knowing what's going on because the energy's not flowing.
I was going to say, I have, I look at this and I read the descriptions, I feel like I've got both.
We all have all of them. So if you look at page, let's see, 10 in your handout, what Bodynamics does is it maps every single muscle to whether you are what's called hypo, the giving up, or hyper, the tension, or healthy. And so this is an example of someone I know whose body has been mapped. And he's got mostly mild hyper, that's the orange. So he's a pretty healthy guy. Most of us have some areas that are severely hypo and hyper, and most areas, you wouldn't be here if you didn't mostly have something close to the middle. So there are degrees of hypo and hyper. It's not you're absolutely giving up and you're absolutely holding back. There's a degree of giving up and a degree of holding back. So this is an example of what a trained Bodynamics practitioner will do when they're working with you is to palpate all the muscles in your body and create a map of your character structure, create a map of your narrative somatically. It's pretty amazing. Yeah.
Talking about weight position, what is the age of weight?
So each stage has a span, and late is later in the span.
Right, okay.
I mean, I can't,
I just didn't know what the range was.
Yeah, so I'm going to get into that, I think, in a little bit,
Okay.
but so for example, the first phase is called the existence phase, and that's when you're in utero and you're just a newborn. So that goes from about second trimester to the first 3 months. But it's not the same for everyone, so you can't say, okay, at 3 months everyone moves into the next stage.
Of course, no,
Right, yeah. Yeah.
What does it mean when it's the A1, B4, that kind of thing? What's that designated?
So, yeah, so neutral, or it means resource. That's the N, and it's green. The A's are the hyper structures. They're the structures where there was an impulse that could have been formed, that was formed, but is being held back. So you can see he's mostly slightly held back. Where it's red instead of orange, he's even more held back. And then the blues are the giving up. So there's a little bit of giving up, and there's a couple areas where there's a lot of giving up in his personality, in his soma.
How much time does it take to create a map like this?
A couple hours. Yeah.
Can I, this is so fascinating. Is this done by a machine or a computer?
No, a person.
You touch the person?
Yeah,
from
you
the
touch
back?
each muscle, and what you do is you sense, when I press in on this muscle, does it push me out, which is the hypo response? Does it come back with me, which is the healthy response, or does it stay in, like it doesn't really follow me out? That's the hypo response. Yeah. So this is how disruptions are encoded in our bodies. You can think of the blank spots in your body as the hypo response, and you can think of the hypertense response as over control. So there's giving up on the one hand and there's over control on the other hand. So as adults, like I said, we know when we're stressed. If we're having a hyper response, we can feel the tension. When we have a hypo response, we succumb to the pressure. We give up. We're losing ourselves. So let's say I had a really hypo response in terms of presenting to groups. I wouldn't be able to be here. I would be like, forget this. You know, it's like I can't. Whenever it's I can't, it's a hypo response. Whenever it's I must or I will, it's more of a hyper response. I will get my needs met, come hell or high water. Yeah, that's a hyper response. So what I want to do now is an exercise so you can get a feel for hypo, hyper, and resourced. So find a new partner. And for this one, actually, I forgot to say, it's probably going to be easier if they're about your size. You're going to be standing for this one. And I need a demo person.
I'll do it.
Okay. So you people on streaming, I'm sorry you won't be able to experience this, but try to remember it, maybe take some notes so you can try it with somebody later if you don't have someone with you now. Okay, so be gentle. Okay.
That was a joke. I'm okay.
I know you are. So what I want you to do is think about something you really want.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be huge. It can be small.
It's huge.
It's huge. I'm not surprised, knowing you. Okay, so you're going to stand like this. Are you right-handed?
Yes.
So if you're left-handed, you're going to stand like this with your left foot in front. And you're going to put your arm out straight. And we're going to try things. First, we're going to do the hypo response, so you can feel what that feels like. Then we'll do the hyper, and then we'll do the resourced. So you put your hand out, and I'm going to put pressure on your wrist. You're going to think about how you can't have it, and you're going to collapse your arm, just so you can feel what it feels like. Yeah.
I can't have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You want it, but you can't have it, and you're just going to let your arm collapse, okay? Let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready. Yeah. It's just.
So if you know anybody who makes contact like this,
Yeah.
the fish handshake, that's the I can't make contact. Yeah, okay, all right. Shake it off. All right. Now, you're really going to fight for it. So go ahead and put your arm out again, and you're going to fight like hell. And you're really not sure you can have it, but you're going to fight for it anyway. Okay? So let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
Okay?
Can you do it one more time?
She's a fighter. Let's try something else instead.
Okay.
Let's try the resource.
I just wanted to feel like how it felt when you were pushing it down when I'm in that.
Well, you can do it with your partner.
Okay.
All right, so again, get in the same position. This time what I want you to do is really ground yourself. Bend your knees. Feel your legs and feet. Feel your belly. Feel your back supporting you. You're going to put your arm out in front of you, and you're going to imagine you're sending energy out your fingertips. So make your fingertips really straight. And you're sending energy out your eyes, off into the distance, to this, that you're going to have it. You know you can have it. Okay? Let me know when you're ready. I'm pushing harder than I was before. That's resource.
Thank you. That's what I meant.
She said, that's what I meant. Any questions before we do it? Okay, go. So you'll.
Which button do you want to use?
grounding and it's doing bigger than yourself.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Well, this is muscle energy. It's like kinetic kinesiology or clinical kinesiology. It's very similar.
Yeah, well.
It's tapping into the same thing.
Right, right. The Strozzi work does this as well. I actually took this from Strozzi. Yeah.
Well, I've had it with osteopaths, with acupuncturists, as well as with Strozzi.
Right. So, oh, did you do the Strozzi?
I haven't done. I've done some workshops with that.
So when you're done, have a seat so that everybody will know when you're done. So, what was that like? Did you discover anything? Anybody want to share?
The energy out makes such a difference. I mean, the grounding and then the combo.
Yeah. You resourced your muscles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was interesting being the person pushing. I could feel my partner's body, like where her energy was.
Uh-huh.
Which was interesting because I hadn't expected that.
What did you notice?
When she was hyper, held her breath.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and which made me, when I saw that, I thought, oh, I wonder if I was doing that, like fighting back, and I don't know, was that it? And when she was resourced, I could feel her strength from down here, not just in her arm fighting back, but like actually feel it going down her torso.
Right.
Or yeah, so.
Right.
It really felt different from the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, so holding breath keeps us from getting energy, right? That's how we get our energy, is from our breath. Yeah. Anyone else?
I felt even when I was letting go, it was a little effort to keep it up.
When
The very first one.
it was hard to keep it up.
No, when she pushed on, I felt that I wanted to effort.
You wanted to
instead of
fight.
I wanted to fight.
Right.
So it got in touch with that fighting and competitiveness, that
Exactly.
even at that point.
Right, so whatever muscles are involved there, you have more hyper in your structure. So the way we relate to the world when we're in a hyper position is that we're going to fight for what we want. Whereas when we're relating from a hypo position, it's like, I don't have what it takes to do this. I'm going to succumb to the pressure and give up.
When you're in the hypo, excuse me, might you also have the attitude that could it go back to I shouldn't want this?
Yes. Yeah, so that's a very interesting, I'm going to repeat what you said because it's not, those of you in back, if you could speak up a little bit, it would help because the mic is right there and the people streaming can't hear. But what you asked was, if you have a hypo response, would it lead to, tell me again? I shouldn't want this. Yeah, so the inner critic shows up in different ways depending on whether we're hyper and hypo and what structure we're in. So giving up a need is the inner critic will come in and say, you shouldn't want this. But it can also show up with a hyper structure. I want this, but I can't have it. I shouldn't want it. So there's more of like a conflict around it, as opposed to I shouldn't want it because I don't deserve it, and that more kind of collapsed way of relating to it. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. Anybody else? So what we're doing when we're coaching people using Bodynamics is that we're coaching people into a new way of being. I know I'm repeating myself a lot, but I think sometimes if I said something in the beginning, it might not make the same kind of sense as if I say it again later, so I hope that's helpful. Also, if I'm going too fast or too slow, remember, too fast, too slow, okay? Because like I said, this is the first time I've presented this material. So we're going to do another exercise now, and get with your same partner. And you'll be standing again. So most of us have trouble saying no. Is there anybody here who has no trouble at all with saying no? So there are two ways of having trouble with saying no. One is being afraid to say no, I can't say no, and the other is I've got to say no all the time. I'm going to fight for my no. And so that's the more hyper response. So we're going to do an exercise to help you start to connect the psychological experience with the muscle experience, sort of building things up here. And no is, we can't really say yes if we can't say no. So no is a basic kind of first step towards energizing our bodies. And when we do this, I want you to really pay attention to dosing. So some of you are going to need to go no, and some of you are going to really just need to find no. We're going to be working with the tricep muscle. So the triceps come online pretty early, like around 4 months, something like that, where the baby starts to be able to push up. So they're on their belly, and they can start to do this. You're nodding, so some of you have seen this happen. They can also, now they don't just spit out their food, which is a kind of no. It's no, right? Don't want that. If that's not allowed, then it affects the tricep muscle. So I need a demo person again. Okay. And so this is all, again, this is in steps, but we're going to stop between each step and share. So I'm going to try to limit the amount of instructions I give you so you don't have to retain so much this time. So you're going to stand with one foot in front of the other and put your hand back. Is that your dominant arm? Okay. And I'm going to put my hand here. I hope everybody's okay with making physical contact. If you're not, you don't have to do this. Let's spin around this way so they can see us. Thank you. So you're going to bring your hand right up to your shoulder. And what you want to do is find your tricep muscle. We're not going to say no yet. We're just going to practice finding the muscle. And what you want to do is don't use your shoulder. That's a different structure, just your tricep. And I'm going to give you resistance. And if you want more or less resistance, to feel your tricep, and you're going to push all the way out to here and lock your elbow. If you want more resistance or less resistance, let me know. And you're going to do that 3 times. Slowly, like he did it. And you can make eye contact or you can not make eye contact. It's up to the person who's, so you bring it all the way here to start. You're going to forget to do that. And you want to really feel your tricep extending. And you can play with eye contact and no eye contact and see what helps you feel your tricep. How hard am I pushing? He's letting me know how hard he wants me to push. So I'm giving him what I think is the right amount of resistance, and he wanted more than I could give him right away. Okay? So that's step 1. And so each of you do it. Any questions besides how hard? Okay. Not yet. Oh, yes, yes, yeah. Yeah, when you've done it, you can just switch on your own.
Does it have to be with our dominant hand?
No.
Okay.
But you want to have one foot in front of the other so you have some grounding. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that this, I was not all the way to my shoulders. So
Right.
Yeah.
If you need more or less pressure, communicate that. The goal right now is just to feel the muscle.
Yeah, we're having trouble getting the tricep getting out of our shoulders.
Uh-huh.
I can feel myself here.
So you're compensating with this. Yeah. So give her less try less resistance.
Okay.
Try it a few times until you can feel it. Does it help when I do that? Yeah, I can feel it.
I know it's there, but it's...
I feel it. It's right there.
It's better even.
Yeah. If your partner can't feel it, you can tap them under the arm.
So I was noticing this in Dan, but I have the same tendency to try to do this.
To bring your.
So I was very conscious when I was doing it to force this down, but then I was feeling.
You were tightening too much there.
I'm wondering what I'm compensating with, to keep this down rather. Because I was feeling something in the tricep, but it didn't feel like it was 100% tricep. So I'm just wondering what I was.
Well, I mean, it's impossible to only use your triceps.
Yeah, right.
So
but yeah, I just was noticing, I guess, maybe it's the tension that I have in here.
Right, you have, and the tension is keeping, so our tension will take over when we have a hypo somewhere else, because that's where our resource is in the tension. There's more resource in the tension.
Right, but even if I'm dropping down and I'm still pushing here, right, I'm just wondering what I'm
what you're using here?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, it's a different
muscles.
Muscle, yeah, it has more to do with will.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that says I can say no.
It says you say no with a different part of you.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, it's fascinating just to think about that.
Yeah, right. Okay. So we're going to do it again, and can I have a demo person? Okay. So we're going to do it again, only this time you're going to say, actually, before we do that, how was that for you? What did you notice?
Mind-boggling. I mean, I know that I had to fight for no's, so being really aggressive about it is what I'm used to. But I immediately could feel it coming from here, and I didn't feel it until you came, right, and touched me here. I didn't know what was there.
Right. Yeah, I'm the same way. Triceps are kind of...
I wanted her resistance in a way, right? Because that's what I'm used to. But that's not giving me the no. Right, that's not the no I want. That was very interesting.
Say more, I'm not quite sure I'm following you. That's not the no you want.
So what I'm recently discovering about myself, I do not like to do the no like this. Right? It's blah, in your face. Stop there. And
right.
There. But that's where I do not get connection, right?
Right.
So I want to have a no like this, where I can be much softer about it.
Yeah.
But I don't even know how to get there.
Yes. Well, we're going to play with that in just a minute. You're going to get a chance to try to do that in just a second. So, but first, we're going to do saying the word no. So you can start to make the connection between the expression and the muscle. So you want to stand with one foot in front of the other, and you're going to let me know how much pressure you want. And say no 3 or 4 times as you move your arm out, and then you're going to lock your elbow when you're done. And we'll just do it once or twice.
Yep.
Okay?
Say it 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
Okay. No, 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 no. No, 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 no.
Okay? All right, so go ahead and try that.
So on the resistance, it's the same thing, just whatever the other person wants. In terms of
Yes. Yeah. And again, you can make eye contact or not, whatever is more comfortable for you with this one. The point is to feel your no in your arm. However much pressure you want, yeah.
Well, I like you were putting more pressure. I like that. So I was, yeah, and I was responding to that. I was just trying to equalize this. That's really interesting.
Because you were pushing harder, so I was just trying to stay equal.
I think it was one of these, right? Yeah, I was pushing a little harder, so you were resistant, so I was doing a little more.
Maybe. Not intentional. Right, okay. Let me just switch arms.
Okay.
No.
I was just laughing because that was a lot more resistance than the other.
Yeah.
That's good. That's fascinating.
My experience. Yeah, it comes up to you.
I don't know if you know this, but it sounded like my voice changed.
Oh yeah.
It went down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So that means I'm resourcing. It wasn't here.
Like that was like right here.
That's interesting. I didn't experience that personally for me. That came up for you.
Yeah. Well, just.
You can sit down for just a minute. You're going to continue with this partner in a moment, but I have another concept to introduce. How was that?
It was fun.
When she was saying no? Yeah, you have a very strong hyper no.
There's also a softness to it because she didn't tighten her jaw or the other things. It was a softness but strength behind the no that I felt in receiving.
Yeah. So this is good information for you around the issue that you brought up earlier, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You have the resource. You just don't use it as much as you want to. Anyone else?
Well, I just noticed that when I was saying no, my voice dropped.
Uh-huh.
So I was not in my head, I was in my body, I was in my core.
Uh-huh. And how was that?
It was awesome, but it was just fascinating because I wasn't necessarily looking for it, and all of a sudden, when my voice just changed, I asked him, did you hear that?
Yeah.
So it just was.
Your voice drops when you drop into your body and when you make room for your experience.
So I just found that fascinating. I didn't keep track of which no it was on, but it was just fascinating. Like, oh wow, that just happened.
Yeah, that's cool.
When she wasn't resisting the word, I felt like I was able to get more into a powerful
no, it felt more centered. I could feel my voice dropping even now.
You could feel?
My voice dropping even now. It's
Uh-huh.
like, you know, kind of the, more of a hyper note, yeah. Felt more powerful.
Yeah. You felt your
I mean,
resource.
I felt more, yes.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good one for you. Yeah. It's a good one for me too. It took me quite a while to feel my triceps. It was kind of upsetting. It was like, why can't I feel this? And then once you do, it's like, oh, I can. Anyone else?
I was surprised that I knew exactly how much pressure I wanted.
Uh-huh.
Like it was like, there wasn't any question.
Right. Right. We know the level of attunement that we need. So if we're okay with saying how much attunement we need, then we get it. If the other is capable. Yeah. Yeah. So the way that hypo and hyper is internalized is in the body, but it's also in our belief systems, right? I can, I can't, I must. The current narrative is something that can be articulated as a message. So one of the tools that Bodynamics uses is called an ARM, an affirmational relational message. So what the Bodynamics practitioner will do with a client is to provide the missing message while the person is activating the muscle. So that's what we're going to play with next. And by the way, this can be done one of two ways. It can either be done just by sort of being a stand-in for the caregiver and giving the message, or it can be done as a probe. So this is a concept that comes out of Hakomi work, which is, I'm going to say this to you and just study your experience in response to what you're hearing. So you need to decide, if you use this, what you are comfortable with. If you're comfortable standing in, and if you can say it genuinely to your client, then, and if you're comfortable being in a relationship with your client where you are giving them the message, then you can do that. If you're not comfortable, you can try it as a probe. Does that make sense, what I just said? No.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
So Bodynamics comes out of a therapeutic model, and therapists will typically stand in as the parent. And so a therapist is perfectly comfortable saying, I love you, I accept your no. They're reparenting in a way. Some coaches are hesitant to do that because it's not in the purview of coaches to reparent. But you can give the message, if you can give it genuinely from yourself as an adult to the other person, it can be very helpful for them to hear that you really feel that way. So I have one client who really needs, it really helps her to hear that I believe that she has a right to stand up for herself. I'm not just saying it, let's try this on. I'm saying, I believe you have the right to stand up for yourself. And she's so grateful to get that from somewhere outside. So I'm just saying, you have to decide for yourselves what level of, what kind of a role you want to play with your client if you try out affirmational messages.
Is the stand-in sort of akin to what you'd see in constellation work? That sort of stand-in?
I only vaguely know what constellation work is, so I know it has to do with families, but that's about as much as I know.
No, that's
Okay.
fine.
So we're going to play with the no again, and I've written some affirmational relational messages on the board. So I suggest that if you're the one who's helping provide resistance, you're going to give the message. If you face this way, you'll be able to see the messages on the board, but I'll just say them out loud. So your no is important to me. Hearing your no helps me relax. I like knowing where your boundaries are. I like hearing you say no. When I hear you say no, I understand you better. See, this is what was missing for most of us around saying no growing up. And so feel what it feels like to be doing it with your triceps and hearing the message. And for this one, I suggest, if you can, to be in eye contact with your partner while you're saying it so you can really feel them. Any questions? Should I demonstrate it? Do you want me to demonstrate it? Okay. Do you want to demo with me? So I'm going to face this way so I remember. Oh, actually, we have to do this because of the camera. Thank you for letting me touch you without asking. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right. So
what am I doing?
So you're going to go ahead with a no, and I'm going to give you a message back.
Okay. No. No.
I like hearing your no.
No.
I like knowing where your boundaries are.
No.
It helps me relax when I hear your no.
No.
Yeah?
Okay.
Everybody get that? Okay.
So you're not just picking one affirmation.
You can say just one, or you can say several, whatever is easier for you. It feels, yeah. So same partner. Yeah, actually, I just overheard some. 1 second. I just overheard something that reminded me of something I wanted to say. Is if you have a particular message that you think would be the most helpful for you to hear, you can tell your partner to say that to you.
Ready to switch? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, are we ready to move into the next step? Stay with your partner. You can stay with your partner. And I want one more demo person. This is, were you going to say something? You went like,
Yeah, I was just wondering, are we up or down?
oh. You're going to be up again. We're doing this one more time. And actually, I don't think I need to demonstrate it. So go ahead and get with your partner. Decide who's going to go first. You're waiting for your partner. And we'll just go ahead and start. So what I want you to do is the person who's going to go first, take a moment and just imagine that you have a pile of kittens or puppies on your chest. On your chest. Or if you have another favorite little mammal, like a bunny, that would be okay too. Yeah. So this is to open your heart. And when you really feel the kittens and puppies in your heart, do the no exercise again, without the message this time, but just feeling what it's like that you can say no and keep your heart open. Okay?
So you're not, no words at all?
No, you'll say no.
Oh, okay.
But your
partner doesn't say the
affirmation.
No affirmation. You'll say no, but you're staying in contact with the kittens and puppies and bunnies that are bouncing around inside your heart.
Oh, yeah.
in the West.
But I didn't know the difference.
Yeah.
Great.
And I knew this was
I'm seeing a lot of smiles. Kittens and puppies are fun.
Hard to scowl with kittens and puppies.
So, let's do a little sharing. How was that?
It's a lot more fun. It's more tender and definitely more grounding because even when the affirmation one, we found ourselves sort of torquing a little bit. This one we were able to stay grounded.
Uh-huh.
I have one question though, sort of how you combine that grounding with activation because the tender side is great, but also is there a way to bring that into and then still be more?
Well, were you able to feel your tricep while you were being tender?
Yeah.
So you did it.
Oh, okay.
You activated your tricep and said no and felt tender all at once. That's a resource.
Yeah, I guess.
I can see it all over your face.
I guess the gap is that I never had the tender version of activation.
Yourself.
Yeah.
Growing up, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, most of us didn't. Yeah. Yeah.
I found it interesting that the distance I could go with the no and understanding that I'm heard was further. So even when we did the affirmation and I needed to go until here before I heard the affirmation, that I started to tense up. The moment the affirmation came, I went down and relaxed again. And with the tender spot, it was further. It stayed there. There was none of this immediate kind of old reaction coming through at some point.
Right, so you can see how all of the pieces come together and you feel more resourced. So the relationship is there, the staying in your heart is there, so you can stay in connection with both yourself and the other person, and you can still have the no.
Yeah.
Yeah. And feeling your muscles. Yeah.
I noticed it was more complex. Like it took a couple of times for me to say it to synchronize the intention, the no intention with the warm fuzzy intention. I was like, wait, those are opposite. And then it was like, no, okay, I need to fit them together.
Right, because that's your edge, right? You have the no and you have the warm fuzzy, but you don't have them together.
Yeah.
It's an integration. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions online or comments? It's harder for those folks to do this exercise, obviously. But I hope you will find someone to try it with at home. Yeah. So we're at a fork in the road here. This was supposed to be the first half. And it's 12:30, which is Q&A time. So we can do one of two things. One of three things. Let me get some feedback from you. I can spend a little bit of time talking about the stages of development and what they look like. I'm definitely only just going to be able to skim the surface on those. We can do an exercise around support, which is one of the, what in Bodynamics is called ego functions, but just think of them as presence skills. So something you need when you're sitting in your seat. Or we can just dive into some Q&A after I say some summarizing remarks and just see where that goes. So raise your hand if you want to hear the stages. 5, 6.
The question is, anything that you talked about somewhat covered in here?
Yes. It's all, well, sort of. I could also just walk you through the handout so that you can use it more effectively later. Who would like to try the support muscles?
The presence?
Yeah. Okay, so more of you want to do that. All right. What that means is that the question on the phone is not going to be addressed. So we'll do 15 minutes with the support function, and then we'll do Q&A. How does that sound?
Great.
What about if we went a little bit longer?
We can't, apparently. I just saw Sahar going. But since you said that, I'm going to be doing some workshops after this. So I have a feedback form for all of you to fill out, and one of the questions on the feedback form is, if you're interested in learning more, if your appetite's been whetted, what topics interest you? So you can also handwrite, what you'd want more on. But this fall and winter, I'm planning on doing some workshops together with someone else who is a trained practitioner. So he's had the whole 5 years of training, and he's a really cool guy. There's also trainings that are coming up if you want to actually learn how to do this with other people. So you can just let me know in the feedback form if you want to be contacted. Also, I work with people one-on-one, and love doing it. So, okay, so let me talk a little bit about ego functions, and then we'll do a support exercise. So if you turn to, let's see. Yeah, page 29. These are the presence skills that I was talking about earlier, but I'll just kind of walk through some of them. So staying present to yourself while you're with a client is called centering in Bodynamics. Understanding what's going on is a cognitive skill, right? That's the cognitive stream. Staying present and open to relationship is about connectedness. Being able to feel empathy is also about connectedness. Distinguishing what's you versus your client is about boundaries and centering. Centering is knowing what's you, and knowing where your boundary is, where your edge is important so that you know that's out there happening with my client. It's not in here happening with me, and so forth. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but there are 4 that are really important to coaches. So centering, I think of as domain 1. If you have an issue in domain 1, or if your client has an issue in domain 1, they're having an issue with centering. Centering is knowing what you feel, who you are, what you want. Grounding is domain 4. It's what's out there, the environment. So grounding has to do with both feeling support from the ground, but also being able to distinguish the stories in your head about what's happening out there to what you can actually ground in your observations. So reality testing is another word for it. It's like, okay, so I have this story that you don't like me, but the reason I think that is because you're not looking at me when we're talking to each other. That's a fact. It doesn't, my interpretation might be wrong. It might be ungrounded. So there, when you work with the grounding muscles, the person can start to see, this is just a story. I actually don't know how this person feels. I just know that I get triggered when they don't look at me when I'm talking to them. Boundaries I've already talked about, and we did a couple exercises around that. And then connectedness has to do with domain 3, right? Being able to receive support having a good support system around you, being able to let that support in, and it all gets integrated as self-support. So we have to receive support originally in order to be able to feel support in ourselves. So before I went to do this presentation, my husband put his hand in my lower back. I had him try all the different spots in my back because they all have to do with different types of support, and that's what we're going to do in a minute. And when he came down to my lower back, it was like, that's what I need right there. And that has to do with the stage that's called solidarity performance, which is about showing up in groups and belonging in groups. So no big surprise, right? That I needed some support there, never having done this before. Okay, so I would say some of them cross multiple domains. So I'm oversimplifying when I say which domain they're in, but they definitely have to do with domain 1 and domain 3, and possibly domain 2 as well, in terms of how you express your boundaries. All right. So you're going to find another partner, maybe someone new this time. And actually, let me just draw your attention to your handout on page 32, but you can just look up here if. So this is, these are your support muscles. Notice that they're all in your back or under your arms. So there's a reason why we say, I have your back, because that's where we feel support. That said, I want to try one quick thing here, which has to do with a very early kind of support, which is an individual exercise, and it will give the people online a chance to experience something. So there's a muscle called the Serratus Anterior superior. So you have, you need to move that way a little bit. You have a muscle here called the serratus, and it has 3 parts. There's one up under your, part of it under your armpit. Part of it is, if you're a woman, right at your bra line. If you're a man, then you know what we're talking about. And then there's another part down here. So when we pick babies up, we pick them up right under their arms, right? And this upper part, which is under your arm, if you put your hands under there and press gently into the top of that muscle, and just sit with that for a minute. And if you could just share if anything starts to shift as you do this.
Just feel the melting of tension.
Uh-huh.
The belly's relaxing.
Anybody notice that you're breathing more?
Mm-hmm.
This muscle is involved in respiration. What I notice is I really start to calm and melt. So this muscle has to do with the very earliest stage, existence stage, where we're learning to feel secure in our being. And that's what happens to me when I do this. I do this for myself a lot. It's kind of, it's okay to be here. It's good to be here, and I'm okay. Yeah? So this is a support muscle that you can do anytime for yourself if you're feeling not so okay, and you can teach it to your clients. especially if you have clients in immediate concerns. Okay, so get with your partner. And I'm going to have to abbreviate this, so give me a second here. Think of the people who have your back. Both of you, just take a minute to, who has your back? Do you feel supported in your needs by someone? Is there someone who supports you to do what you want to do? Or who joins you with your curiosity about things? Is there someone who supports your opinions? You can express an opinion and you know that they will support you. Is there a group that you feel a sense of belonging with? That group supports you somehow. Just belonging to that group supports you. What do you notice in your bodies as you think about these things? Anyone?
Sweating. I feel sturdy.
Uh-huh. You look sturdy right now, too. You look really grounded. Yeah.
Relaxed. Sturdy and relaxed.
Yeah.
More spacious.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Doesn't have to work as
Because you don't have to fight so hard to support yourself. Right. Okay. So I'm going to demonstrate with somebody. And volunteering? Okay, good. So what I'm going to invite you to do is decide who's going to go first. And so the person who goes... We need to go like this so they can see us. So make sure you're okay with being touched. I think you've all been touched already, so I assume you are. But if you're not, again, you can say no. Find your triceps. No. So what I'm going to do is put my hands on different support muscles. And I'll guide you through this, but I'm just going to demonstrate it for a second. And what you want to do is just feel what that support feels like, because it's going to feel a little different depending on where I put my hand. Okay? And you can say, I want more or less pressure with this one too. More pressure? Just really take your time to feel what that feels like. And then the thing to do here is to name to your partner what this feels like.
A sense of partnership.
Mm-hmm. Good. I'm going to go through this more quickly than you will, just in the interest of time. Then I'll guide you to put your hands between the shoulder blades. More pressure, less pressure?
Well, that's good. There's a sense of guiding, support.
Okay. Then below the bra line, below the shoulder blades.
It's just very support. Encompassing.
Encompassing, okay. And then finally, the low back.
It just feels warm and sort of soothing.
Soothing, okay. Good. My hand is, let's do a little. You're a good dance partner.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'll guide you through this. So you're going to first start by putting your hand on the top of the shoulder. This is called the trapezius, upper trapezius muscle.
Which shoulder?
No, it doesn't matter which shoulder. And let your partner know if you want more or less pressure. And really try to sense in. What does this feel like? And now move your hands down between the shoulder blades. Just notice what shifts in your experience. And now move your hands down below the shoulder blades. And finally, moving your hands to the low back. So you're getting tired? So you're hypo there. Yeah. There's a giving up. Yeah. 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 Okay, and then let's switch so the other person can have the experience. Yeah, so your hands on the trapezius, the top of the shoulder to start. And it's fine to share with your partner what this is like as you're doing it. But sense first. And then move your hands down to between the shoulder blades. And if your hands are sideways, it'll be easier to isolate that area. Notice you may like some of these better than others. And then below the shoulder blades. They likely each trigger a different experience. And now the low back. Okay. And then let's come back into the group and share what that was like.
It's interesting. Support is also, I think, more awareness.
Thank you very much.
So what did you notice? Yeah, so sleepy can be two things. It can be relaxation, but it can also be that there's some that there's some giving up around getting support. And so that's where the dosing is important. Like, okay, that's as much as I can let in right now. Let's separate so I can integrate this. Because it doesn't help to push. So sleepiness is often, you're in a blind spot. I wonder if anybody who hasn't said anything yet would like to say something. Not to put you on the spot. Okay, well, anyone else?
And is this something you suggest that could be done with clients?
Well, you can always, if you have that kind of relationship with your clients, you can always experiment with it. The piece that we don't have time to do today, there are a couple of them. One is that each of those places where you felt the support relates to a different developmental structure. So the first one we did was around existence, which has to do with being secure in your being, being able to really be here. Like, I have a right to be here and to exist. The trapezius, so the exercise I wanted to do that we've run out of time for is to have you think of a situation where you need support. And it could be a need that you need support in, it could be an opinion, it could be something around belonging. And then have your partner experiment with which kind of support feels best for that. Because we went through different structures with that exercise just now. I haven't talked about the structures because we didn't have time. They are in your handouts. So you can experiment with it, but depending on what issue your client is dealing with, it may or may not be helpful. And also, is it support that they need or is it something else? Yeah.
So kind of focus us then in terms of the handout where that would be that you would find.
So yeah, let me just do a quick overview of the handouts, and then I want to save a couple minutes for questions. I'm sure there are a lot of them. So we went through present skills, page 3. We went through core principles, page 5, what resources look like. Let's see. So page 11, centering is one of the ego functions, and these are the muscles involved in centering. The stages are shown in pictures on page 12. And then the themes around the stages are described starting on page 13. So what I've done is I've talked about what the theme is for the infant as well as how the resource shows up in an adult. So if your client doesn't have this resource, then or if you don't have this resource, then there may be a disruption. There's likely a disruption at that stage. Then on page 16, it shows how people show up if they are disrupted early or late for each stage. So there's a lot here. This is, but hopefully it makes some kind of sense. Then on page 17, it starts with, if a person is early, then what kinds of things do they say to themselves or to you? And if they're late, what kinds of things do they say to themselves or you? So let's take need, for example. If a person was not allowed to have their needs, or their needs weren't responded to, then they may not know what their needs are. Needs, what are they? I don't know what I need. If you're fine, I'm fine. So you do get a lot of coaches and therapists who are disrupted in the need phase because they're so tuned in to what everybody else needs. They don't understand that other people aren't. Whereas if they're late, I can sense my needs, but I'm always getting the wrong thing. Everyone else gets what they need. It's just me that has to do without. If I have to ask you for it, you're only giving it to me because you have to. So you can see that the need is felt, but it's not received. So that's what's up to page 19. Then just some examples of muscles and what functions they have to do with. And then starting on page 25 is my first attempt at trying to describe what would show up in a relationship with a client or another person if they are early or late and if you are early or late. So for instance, in the existence phase, if there's a disruption, if it's early, we go into our heads and leave our bodies behind. If it's late, we go into our bodies and our feelings and we leave our thinking behind. So an early disruption in existence would show up as a client living in their head and having little access to their body. So when I did the body scan with one of my very first clients when I was training here, and I was so proud of myself. It was just such a beautiful job I did of the body scan. And he looked at me and he went, he didn't feel any of it. It's like, body? What body? Right? But I didn't really understand that. And so that was pretty disappointing. Whereas if they're late, they're all in their emotions. So these are the people who over-catastrophize, Chicken Little. It's like, oh my God, it's just terrible that this thing happened. I have a friend who's late existence, and everything is intense, and everything is full of contact, and like, it's the loss of connection that's hard for an early existence. So I'm sorry I couldn't go through all of this, but I hope that you will take one of the workshops or explore the materials online. And then on page 33 is just an outline of a typical Bodynamics session. And on page 35, I attempted to correlate some of the stages with Enneagram types, because I know there are a lot of Enneagram people here. So, 34, yeah, yes. Yes.
And then the determined position is sort of.
Are they early or late? Have they given it up, or are they fighting for it? Yeah. Yeah, so it won't make complete sense to you because I didn't present the stages. So with our 1 minute left, does anybody have a burning question that you just can't stand not getting answered right now. And I will stick around. Can I stick around for afterwards, too? Yes?
How do you use this with clients?
Yeah, so I'll try to give you a short answer. And if you look at the handout, then the last couple of pages describe what can happen in a session. But basically, what you do is you, obviously the most important thing is the relationship, so the mutual connection. But the client brings in a topic. I feel like when I'm in a group, I have to compete, and people don't like me because I'm so competitive. They bring in a topic. You identify, okay, so that you agree on what you want to work on and how they would like to be. So I would like to be able to stay connected to people and yet not give up that I shine on in certain things. Then you identify whether they're early or late. So the competitive position is a late position. They are able to stand out, but they fight for it. Then you identify which muscles to work with and how, because of what position they're in and what structure they're in. You work with the muscle that needs to be stretched or activated, depending on, so if it's late, it needs to be stretched. If it's activated, it needs to be, if it's early, it needs to be activated. And you work with them to experience expressing the missing piece, whatever that is. And then finally, you have a conversation to integrate the experience. So often there's an emotional release with the process of stepping into a new experience, which helps to integrate the new way of being. And then you have a sort of a meta conversation about it. So we're over time now. Right, Sahar? So I want to thank those of you online for showing up if you're still here. I'm not quite sure how the technology works. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. At the end of the handout, which was sent to everyone, is my contact information. I also have some cards up here. And there are workshops coming up starting in October. So thank you, everyone, for coming, and I'll stick around for a little bit.
Thanks again to all of you who joined, as well as the live stream. So just a couple of announcements in terms of programs that New Ventures West has coming up. James is teaching Masterful Conversations in October, which is based on all of the work that he did with Fernando Flores. It's an excellent class. Sarta is teaching Thwarting the Inner Critic, which if you haven't taken that class is also really fantastic. And we have our book study group every quarter, so it's a book that is selected and you read the book each month, one per month, 3 months, 3 books, and it's a 2-hour conversation. And the first part of that is everyone sharing their own reflections on the book, and then the second hour is actually sitting with the author of the book, which is really quite special. So if you have any questions about that, you can visit the website, or I'll be here for a couple of minutes as well. And let's give Laura another round of applause.
This is taking it in. This is the muscle for taking it in. Thank you.
Was that including one of the emails? This?
We'll send that out.
You'll send it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have trouble taking in compliments, so I have to do that to be able to.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Or re-meet you. I'm not sure which it is.
You come across very experienced.